So, I haven't got another installment of our Connection series. That was well and truly landed last week. I do want to kind of turn our attention towards the cross and towards Easter. It's 4 Sundays. Is it 4 Sundays or 3? I couldn't work it out. 4? 3? Something like that. Anyway, we're heading towards Easter, and I want to turn our attentions towards Easter and the Easter story. And I want to look at the Easter story through the lens of the theme of the year, which is love, and to look at how the love of God is revealed through the work of Jesus, through in and through the cross. And today I want to begin by kicking off with a kind of an Easter prelude story out of the Gospel of John. And if you've got your Bibles, turn with me to John chapter 11. I'm going to read a well-known, well-trod story to you. And that is the resurrection of Lazarus. Yeah. All right, let me read this to you. Now, a certain man was sick, Lazarus of Bethany, the town of Mary and her sister Martha. It was Mary who anointed the Lord with fragrant oil and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. Therefore the sisters sent to him, saying, Lord, behold, he whom you love is sick. When Jesus heard that, he said, the sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God. Say, glory of God. That the Son of God may be glorified through it. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister Lazarus, so when he heard that he was sick, he stayed 2 more days in the place he was. Then after this, he said to the disciples, let us go to Judea again. The disciples said to him, Rabbi, lately the Jews sought to stone you, and you're going there again? Jesus answered, are there not 12 hours in a day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble because he sees the light of the world. But if one walks in the night, he stumbles because the light is not in him. These things he said, and after that he said to them, our friend Lazarus sleeps, but I go that I may wake him up. Then his disciples said, Lord, if he sleeps, he'll get well. However, Jesus spoke of his death, but they thought that he was speaking about taking a rest in sleep. Then Jesus said to them plainly, Lazarus is dead. And I'm glad for your sakes that I was not there, that you may believe. Nevertheless, let's go to him. Then Thomas, who is called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, let us also go that we may die with him. So when Jesus came, he found that he had already been in the tomb 4 days. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles away, and many of the Jews had joined the women women around Martha and Mary to comfort them concerning their brother. Now Martha, as soon as she heard that Jesus was coming, went and met him, but Mary was sitting in the house. Now Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you'd been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know whatever you ask God, God will give you. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha said to him, I know that he will rise in the resurrection at the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, though he may die, he shall live, and whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? She said to him, yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is to come into the world. And when she had said these things, she went her way and secretly called Mary, her sister, saying, the teacher's come and he's calling for you. And as soon as she heard that, she rose quickly and came to him. Now Jesus had not yet come into the town, but was in the place where Martha met him. Then the Jews who were with her in the house and comforting her, when they saw Mary, rose up quickly and went out, followed her, saying, she's going to the tomb to weep there. Then when Mary came to where Jesus was, she saw him. She fell down at his feet, saying, Lord, if you'd been here, my brother wouldn't have died. Therefore, when Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her weeping, he groaned in spirit and was troubled. And he said, where have you laid him? They said to him, Lord, come and see. Jesus wept. Then the Jews said, see how he loved him. And some of them said, could not this man who opened the eyes of the blind also have kept this man from dying? Then Jesus, again, groaning in himself, came to the tomb. It was a cave and a stone laid against it. And Jesus said, take the stone away. Martha, the sister of him who was dead, said to him, Lord, by this time there's a stench, for he's been dead 4 days. And Jesus said to her, did I not tell you that if you would believe, you would see the glory of God? Then they took away the stone from the place where the dead man was lying. And Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that you've heard me. And I know that you always hear me, but because of the people who are standing by, I said this, that they may believe you sent me. Now, when he had said these things, he cried out with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. And he who had died came out, bound hand and foot with grey clothes, and his face was wrapped with a cloth. And Jesus said to them, loose him and let him go. What a cool story. I don't normally read that long a passage, but I want you to get the whole shebang from the Bible before we dive into it. So I want to lay the lens of love over this passage. And before we jump into the passage, John is a fantastic gospel. It's a little different to the other gospels, which are called synoptic, in that they borrow from each other's gospels, it seems, or another gospel, which we don't have in our Bibles, of the account of Jesus. But the way John constructs his gospel account of the story of Jesus is designed around 7 signs that feature through the life of Jesus. And these signs are miracles that Jesus did in and through his life. And the raising of Lazarus is the 6th sign in the book of Lazarus. And the signs have a purpose. That when you join them together and overlay them together, they're designed to actually speak of who Jesus is and reveal God to us. The purposes of that is it's meant to combust faith in our hearts. It's meant to reveal something of the heart of God. And so in this story, in the account that I've just read from the Bible here, John, the writer, speaks about this resurrection of Lazarus being another means in which Jesus is glorified. If I was to ask you one word that describes God, I wonder which word that you might use to pick to describe God. What are some of your ideas? Merciful. Love. Father. Faithful. Kind. Glory. Yeah. Compassionate. The word glory, I think, is probably the most apt word that comes closest to combining all of those other words into one single word. The glory is the essence of who God is, his holiness, his kindness, his faithfulness, his love, his everything is contained within this single word, glory. And glory in the Bible is used to represent God in different ways. When the glory of God is revealed in the Old Testament, it's often associated with splendor and light and brightness when it shows up. And you often hear this of the encounters that people have with the Lord, that he is resplendent and he is shining and he's wonderful and beautiful. But in John's gospel, John actually centers the glory of God in and through the person of Jesus Christ. He is God's glory revealer. And in his story, and in particular this story, the glory of God is shown up through the resurrection of Lazarus in this story. It's one of the ways God is glorified to it. Scientists who study the sun and have tried to work out how the sun operates now know something more about how the sun operates, because they've got these amazing telescopes where they can look directly at the sun and see that the sun is actually an interesting object in the universe. That when we look at the sun, our eyeballs disintegrate. But through these special telescopes, they're able to gaze continually at the sun, and they're able to look at the surface of the sun and what's coming off the sun. And they've discovered that the sun is actually shining because it's releasing high heated plasma. And some of you scientists going, no, that's not right, Maddie. But the rest of you, come along with me. It's releasing plasma off the surface of the sun. And what's interesting about the sun is that the sun's brightness isn't constant. And that it goes up and it goes down, and the plasma that's coming off it is variable at times, and apparently it goes through 11-year cycle, the sun, where it's high at its peak and then it's low at its peak, and that 11-year cycle influences the seasons and the temperature on the planet Earth. And what's interesting is that the scientists have tried to understand, why is it that the sun is driven in this way? What is driving the sun? When John talks about the glory of God, he's not just simply looking at the outward, what's shining off God. He actually goes deeper into the very core of who God is, and he looks at why it is that God is glorifying himself. And in this passage today, and this is really critical for you to see in the way that it speaks to you, that God glorifies himself because he loves. In our passage today, it mentions twice the word love. I don't know if you caught that on two instances. It speaks of Mary and Martha calling for Jesus because they knew that he loved them. And then secondly, it's the author John specifically identifies that he loved Mary and Martha. What causes the glorification of Jesus through this passage is he loves. That's what's driving his response, his action, and everything in this passage. Why is this important? Sometimes I think that when we think of God, we think of him as this unemotional, immovable thing, powerful force in the sky, and that he can sometimes feel distant and removed from us. As much as we might sing otherwise in church, it can feel like he's impervious to what's going on in our life. But here we get a close-up encounter with the heartbeat of God, and what we see is this divine God who loves people specifically, that he will do the extraordinary because he is touched and moved by the very things that are happening in our lives. God loves. Speaking to a guy last week who's new to our church, and he's making a documentary about miracles. And we were talking about miracles. How many of you love miracles? Yeah, me too. Yeah, if you're a believer, you love miracles. And we were talking about how some of the wonderful miracles that we've seen and heard. And then I got on to the specific kind of miracles that I particularly like about God. And that is where, beyond what it is that God does, the actual miracle side, I love it where you actually catch a glimpse of the heartbeat of God behind the miracles, as opposed to anything specific he's doing, as wonderful as that is. When I capture the heart of God behind a miracle, it leaves me undone because I'm touched by an aspect of of who he is, his character and his nature. And I've seen this probably only less than a handful of times, and I've seen, I would say, hundreds and maybe thousands of miracles. And all of them are like, wow, but only a handful of them have I ever caught the actual heartbeat of the God who loves us behind them. I've shared this a few times, but it bears repeating. There was a time when we were ministering in the UK, and we were on our 25th wedding anniversary. We went away for the weekend, and I just wanted a weekend off ministry. It was pretty intense ministering on the streets of London, and we went to the Cotswolds into this beautiful scenic country, and it was like, weekend off, and all Jody wanted to do was to minister to people, of all things. And we ended up visiting a few sites, and whenever we would go there, she'd be looking hungrily to actually go and minister to the people that were working there. And in the Cotswolds, how many of you visited the Cotswolds in the UK? Yeah. Think cottages with the thatched roofs, the straw roofs, and quaint English lanes and beautiful English scenery. That's the Cotswolds. And within the Cotswolds, scattered around, are these incredible stately manor homes. They're beautiful, just like you would see in Downton Abbey type stuff. It's just like English through and through. And we were driving down one lane not knowing where we were going, and we come across this stately looking manor, and Jody says, oh, let's go in. And I was like, oh, let's do that. And then we get there and we realize it's not open to the public. It's actually a old people's home. And I was like, oh, okay, let's carry on. And Jody was like, let's go in and see who we can minister to. I was like, honey, you can do that. I'll be in the car. And so she tried to get in to the stately manor, and actually she was banging on the door for about 10 minutes. No one actually came to let her in. I was like, phew, got out of jail. And we carried on driving, and then we're driving some more, and we come to this other beautiful stately building with these amazing chimney stacks off it. And we got out and we're like, oh, that's such a gorgeous building. We're taking photographs for our Facebook and our Instagram posts. And we look across the road, and it's another old people's home. And Jody says to me, this must be the Lord. It's a sign. And I was like, all right, honey, because happy wife, happy life. So I relented. And so we went across, or walked across the road from where we were taking the photos, and I knocked on the door, and a nurse opens the door. And I said to the nurse, hey, we're on our anniversary. It's going to sound strange. We're missionaries here in the UK, and we feel like we're meant to pray for anyone in the home that would be open to us praying. And she kind of looked confused. You don't imagine that they had many people like this cold calling to them. And she said, let me go and talk to my boss. And a few minutes later, her boss comes to the door. I explain again, would it be okay if we prayed for people? We're ministers of Jesus, and we want to bless people. And she said, look, this is a dementia home. Most people actually are really, really diminished here, but there are a handful of people in the lounge now. You can go and introduce yourself. If any are open to you praying for them, then you can pray. I was like, great, we're in. So we went into the lounge, and there's probably 30-odd seniors in their latter years sitting around there, and we'll introduce ourselves. And we offered to pray, and no one, would you believe it, wanted us to pray for them. How rude. So the senior nurse that's standing with us is feeling sorry for us, and she points out a gentleman who's sitting in a chair, and she says, look, he used to be an Anglican priest. I'm sure he wouldn't mind you praying for him, but he's highly diminished with his dementia. So we walk across to where he is, and we begin to pray. And as I'm praying for him and we're praying for him, we're just hearing the heartbeat of God for this man. Son, I love you. I love you. I love you, I love you, I love you. And as I'm praying, I'm not just hearing it, I'm feeling the heartbeat of the Father for this man who, by all human accounts, is in his most useless place in his life. He can do nothing useful anymore with his life except wait for God until God takes him. And yet all I'm hearing over the Father is this love. And I'm joining the dots in my head going, God, you sent us here just for this one man because you want him to know that you love him. And I'm undone, like just weeping and weeping. Why? I see the glory of God at work. The heartbeat of the Father who loves you, who loves us, who loves people so much that he can utilize people like ourselves. It was undoing. And in this account that we're reading here, we see the heartbeat of a God who loves, who's motivated by people's pain and infirmity. And he, when he hears news of Lazarus, yes, he holds back, but we're going to see why he holds back. So the second thing I want to show you is from this passage is that, again, very often when we run into strife in our life and we do what we do when strife shows up in our life, we call out to God, oh God, help, help, help. That's right. That's how our prayers reach heaven, yes? As elaborate as they sound. And sometimes it can feel like, and we see an instance here in this story, where the prayer isn't answered immediately. There are times where it seems to happen, but there's a high level need going on here. The red lights are flashing and Mary and Martha cry out, help, 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 help. And nothing happens. And they're confused as to what's going on. And before we get into why, what I want you to see is he fully intends to go there. But in doing so, he puts himself in Taliban country. Going back into Judea, which is where they lived, was the hot spot for where the people were most vehemently against them. In chapter 7, and I think I've got the verse here up on the screen if we can see that. At the beginning of chapter 7, verse 1, it says that the people of Judea actually want to kill Jesus. And so the disciples all know this, and these aren't empty threats, because at the end of our story, they actually come up with a plot to kill Jesus because of what he does. So this isn't just hot air. The disciples are scared to go back here. But in this story, we see a Jesus who is God, who is prepared to put himself in danger for someone he loves. And this should speak to you and me concerning our circumstances.